Hi, Mr. Singh. Marina von Stackelberg from CBC Television. You and Pierre were both in Hamilton last night. He held a rally that had thousands of people. You had a campaign office opening that had a few dozen. What does this say about the support for the New Democrats right now, especially in an area where the NDP has traditionally counted on support?
Folks, it is only day 4 of these election campaigns, and things are starting to get pretty interesting as we have the CBC prying into Mark Carney's affairs, as well as the CBC trying to defend what Mark Carney's affairs are. And if you're unfamiliar with what I'm talking about, take a listen to this question posed by them.
Hi, Mr. Carney. Tom Parry with CBC. Could I just follow up on that? Could you explain in the case of those Brookfield funds, like what was the argument for registering the funds in Bermuda? Is it ethical to do that? And is it something as Prime Minister that you'd have to crack down on? I'm not sure if it's a problem, but is that something that you'd have to crack down on?
I think the important thing, Tom, is that the flow through of the funds go to Canadian entities who then pay the taxes appropriately, as opposed to taxes being paid multiple times before they get there. So that's how we have the structure. That's a structure that all of our pension funds, for example, the Caisse de dépôt, or Ontario teachers, or OMERS, municipal employees, or all the big pension funds in Canada, which are very successful, which protect union workers in many cases. I'm speaking of union workers today, and supply to them. It's those entities and their employees who are covered. So the structures work for that effect.
What's the advantage, though, of putting it into a place like
it ensures that it's an efficiency of a structure, so that ensures that the flow through goes to the entities that are resident in the countries.
But is it avoiding tax in any way?
It doesn't avoid tax, because the tax is paid in, for example, the examples all I gave, the taxes are paid in Canada, yes. Okay?
Now, it was pretty clear that Mark Carney didn't really want to talk about Bermuda or explain anything about how that makes any sense. But let's listen to Janice McGregor try to defend it and explain it to us simpletons.
Brookfield stuff first, though. As you mentioned, our colleague Danielle LeBlanc out this morning with a story about the way Brookfield Asset Management used tax havens for a number of its clean green tech investment funds. We are all in this campaign going through a bit of an education in terms of global asset management and how this works. But essentially, the nature of the story is to highlight that sort of, as the chairman of the board of this global asset manager, some of the sort of funds that sort of he ultimately was overseeing were making use of things like Caribbean kind of tax havens to shelter their investments, let them grow tax-free. Mark Carney, though, when taking questions about this today, sort of walked us through kind of how this works and why Canadians should sort of think about this in a more nuanced way. Because he pointed out that people who manage the investments are in kind of the asset management game, including the assets of very ordinary working class folks, like the Teachers' Pension Plan in Ontario, for example, Quebec's Caisse de dépôt. These are people who manage kind of the pension money of a lot of Canadians, kind of very ordinary Canadians, not all rich and wealthy people. But they put some of these sort of holdings in tax havens. Why? Mark Carney explained today. It's because they don't want it to be taxed twice. Eventually, this is income that will be taxed in Canada. But if it was being taxed in terms of sort of the company that was managing the asset as it went along, Mark Carney explained, that would be a form of double taxation. And indeed, we've been kind of reading up to understand better the relationships between different big asset managers out there. And indeed, you do see kind of collaborations, joint ventures between Brookfield that he was ahead of and the Caisse de dépôt and the Teachers' Pension Plan and other kind of big players in the asset management game. And he's not wrong when he says that the strategy here is to shelter it while it's growing in the fund so that it is taxed when sort of the individual people pull it out as a form of their retirement savings. And the idea that this is only something a haven for the wealthy or for a wealthy corporation is actually misunderstanding what's really going on here in a sense, because there's a lot of like ordinary folks' pensions kind of involved in this kind of bigger investment world. So Mark Carney tried to sort of walk people through that in terms of understanding how Brookfield would be proceeding in terms of, competing for that investment business as a private sector entity.
So Janice tries to make the argument that it's not just for the wealthy, it's also for the ordinary people, like teachers' pensions and other workers. But my question would be, well, why are teachers' pensions and all that being invested overseas in these tax havens? Well, one answer is because the government likes to tax you, especially with the capital gains tax up the yin-yang, so you lose a lot of money, and instead of losing that, you send it to these tax havens. But also the Canadian pension plan investment started being invested overseas, like in Asia, more specifically China, because of Mark Carney's new advisor, Mark Wiseman, who's a gentleman of the Century Initiative. He also worked at BlackRock. He originally started with the Canadian pension plan investment. And here's a video from 12 years ago of him talking about how important it is to invest in Asia.
Well, the Canada Pension Plan Investment Board is investing in Asia, quite frankly, because we have to diversify our assets around the world. Today we have $166 billion in assets, and it's important that those assets get invested around the world, and in particular with Asia and China in particular, now the second largest economy in the world, soon to be the largest economy in the world. We have to go where the investment opportunities are, and those opportunities are increasingly in Asia. And one thing that people may not be aware of, but our first office outside of Canada was in Asia. Our first office, which we opened almost 5 years ago now, was in Hong Kong, and it was very deliberate that we did that. We did that in order to build up our own expertise and capabilities on the ground. Well, I think Asia is critical to Canada's economic future. As we know, Asia is the fastest growing region in the world. China itself will, in the next 20 years or thereabouts, become the largest economy in the world. It's already the second largest economy in the world. So Canada has to pay attention to Asia for that reason alone.
Now, in yesterday's press conference, Mark tried to spin a different story by saying, China is important to us, but not that important. We can do some things with them, but not a whole lot. But then reiterated what Mark just said, how they are our second biggest clients.
He's suggesting you're beholden to China. Are you beholden to China?
Absolutely not. First thing. Second thing I'll say, look, Mr. Poilievre doesn't understand the world, doesn't understand how the world works. China happens to be our second largest trading partner. It's our second largest trading partner.
The Chinese ambassador has given, I think, 3 or 4 interviews in the last few weeks talking about his interest in reopening free trade talks. My question for you is, as we try to diversify away from the United States and reduce our reliance on our trade with the United States, is it your belief that we should be increasing our trade with China?
Look,
and reopening free trade talks.
Here's my view on this broader set of issues. We need to diversify our trade as a country. We are over-reliant on, as wonderful as the trade going across that bridge, we are over-reliant on the United States. I think it's a lesson we've all learned. We need to diversify. We want to diversify with like-minded partners. There are partners in Asia that we can build deeper ties. There is certain activity but the partners in Asia that share our values don't include China. There's certain activity that we could have with China. We obviously do have a large amount of trade with them, but we have to be very careful, very deliberate, and they need to meet Canadian standards.
Now, probably not so surprising to most of you, this isn't the first time that the Liberals have been caught with this whole tax haven situation, because when Trudeau originally got into power, his very first finance guy got caught and the CBC reported on that. I also covered this story probably maybe a month ago, but here's a little refresher on what the CBC found in terms of these tax havens.
Stephen Bronfman became the Liberal Party's revenue chair in 2013.
Yeah, I'm the finance guy. Right?
A longtime friend of Justin Trudeau, for years he worked for and then headed the Bronfman family's investment firm, Claridge. And it's Claridge that in 1991 set up the offshore trust in question in the Cayman Islands.
So very interesting that Trudeau's original finance guy gets caught moving all this money in the Cayman Islands, and then Trudeau's final financial advisor, who now is the next prime minister, has also been kind of dealing with this same situation. He says it's normal practice to do this, but take a listen to what Pierre Poilievre said when he was asked about this.
Now he claims that somehow this money gets funneled through a Bermuda tax haven only to come back to Canada. Well, why wouldn't he just leave it in Canada in the first place? If it were going to be taxed in Canada, he wouldn't need to funnel it through Bermuda. I don't know, how many of you funnel your investments through Bermuda before you bring them back to pay taxes? I think the answer is zero. The answer to the other question was whether I have investments in tax havens. The answer is no. After President Trump began threatening our economy, I sold my investments in foreign economies, and now I invest in Canadian stocks and Canadian companies. I brought my money home to this country.
Now, I find it interesting that Pierre is just flat out saying, I had foreign investments, I sold them all, now I have only Canadian investments in stock, yet Mark Carney still can't tell us what assets he has in his blind trust. He'll go on and on about how he's put them in the blind trust and that he did it very early, but doesn't seem to remember what assets they actually are, which is very surprising. Now, something that happened the day before was an article was released by the Globe and Mail about interference in Pierre's leadership race by India.
This was the Globe and Mail headline this morning, that CSIS alleges India organized support for Poilievre's 2022 Conservative leadership bid. The Globe cited an unnamed source with top secret clearance saying CSIS learned that Indian agents were involved in raising money and organizing within the South Asian community, and that CSIS did not share this information with Mr. Poilievre because he does not have the necessary security clearance.
Most of us have already heard about this because this story broke last year. And when this happened, Pierre was pretty adamant about him not wanting to get a security clearance because he would be muzzled. He wouldn't be able to say anything about this foreign interference if there was some. And he had people like Tom Mulcair coming out back, I think, in July, defending him, saying, I totally agree with Pierre. He shouldn't get it. It was the right decision. Well, yesterday, Tom reiterated this and doubled down on it, and also said Stephen Harper went out of his way when he was prime minister and Tom Mulcair was the opposition, and he gave this kind of information to Tom even when Tom didn't have his clearance. Take a listen.
I made the same comments to your colleague Todd this afternoon on CTV News Channel. I agree completely with Pierre Poilievre on this. I believe he is completely right. You do not accept to play this mugs game where you restrain your ambit and your ability to act as leader of the official opposition, which is a constitutional role to hold the government to account. And this game where you have people in the hierarchy of the security establishment saying, oh, he really should come in, but then he's not allowed to talk about it anymore. Really? Didn't we just have a commission of inquiry headed up by Madame Justice Hogue, who put all of this stuff away and said there might have been a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but all of a sudden we're talking about whether Poilievre actually got the 68%. What, maybe it was 67%? This is madness, to try to make this an issue in a campaign that is so serious for the country, to try to go back to this stuff and to try to complain about Poilievre wanting to do his constitutional duty. He wants to do his job of holding the government to account, and no, he's not going to walk into that bear trap that consists of getting a security clearance, seeing documents that could be important, and not talking about it. By the way, when I was leader of the opposition, Vashi, a certain Stephen Harper would call me personally. His staff would give me a setup, called me once during a wedding reception and said, I've got to talk to you. And it was Harper himself saying, look, there's this and this and this that's going to roll out in the next few days. It's going to be in the news. I want you to know about it. That's what a prime minister does with his or her leader of the opposition. You talk. Nobody had to make me swear any oath. I was still the leader of the opposition, but I had no intention of going in front of a camera and talking about it.
So it's now clear that Justin Trudeau could have told him at any point. Mark Carney has the ability to let Pierre know, yet these guys would rather use this as a political wedge to paint Pierre as some sort of danger, foreign interference, whatever the case may be. But as Kate Harrison pointed out, how is Pierre Poilievre not able to get any of this information, yet the Globe and Mail has this top secret clearance that they're able to get the information?
Yeah, I think election interference is a problem. It's a problem that I think spans party affiliation. I don't know that we've necessarily learned more today than what was previously known in a general sense. And I don't think, David, it does change the rationale from Poilievre to not receive that briefing. I go back to what exists within the CSIS Act to provide a briefing to political leaders under threat reduction measures. That remains an option for CSIS to use today to brief Pierre Poilievre on potential
He wouldn't
interference.
accept it, though, when it was offered last fall,
My
right? Because he said it would have limited his ability to speak,
My
right?
understanding is that it's an open offer to have a briefing under the threat reduction measure context. Rather than it create intrigue in the Globe and Mail headlines, I'm struggling a little bit with how this is both so secret and secure information and intelligence that it can't be provided to the leader of the opposition under the threat reduction measure, but it absolutely can be shared with the Globe and Mail and with readers of the paper. So this is either a serious enough measure that it requires that briefing to occur under the TRM. The Prime Minister can also provide that briefing to the leader, should he so choose. Neither of those things have happened, but it somehow is appearing on the front page of the Globe.
Now, the Globe and Mail emphasizes in their article release that they can't tell you who the source is because it is confidential information, yet they can't give this information to Pierre Poilievre, who is the leader of the opposition, and it's about him and potential foreign interference. Doesn't make any sense, but their counter argument is that this wouldn't muzzle him. He would still be able to say certain things. However, when Carney was asked about Chandra Arya yesterday and his security clearance and how he was tied to some foreign interference, listen to what Mark Carney said.
Mr. Carney, I'm Judy Trin with CTV News. We have confirmed that Chandra Arya was disqualified because of foreign interference, specifically related to his meeting with the Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Given the fact that you have security clearance, can you tell Canadians why that is a concern? And the Liberals have yet to put up a full roster of candidates in all 343 ridings. What is the possibility that foreign interference is impacting that selection of candidates, either from India, China, Russia, Iran?
Let me go. I'm going to deal quickly with the first part of your question, if I may, which is that one of the things, and I've had security clearance for almost 2 decades in various forms at various times. One of the things about having security clearance is you don't then take information that you have from security clearance and repeat it to others.
So there you have it, folks. Mark Carney just admitted that if Pierre got this information, he could not go about telling other people. Now, clearly, the CSIS individuals who told the Globe and Mail don't follow this practice for some odd reason, but Mark Carney just admitted he has a security clearance. He knows the information most likely about the situation with Chandra Arya, yet he says, oh, well, if you have security clearance, you don't go and you tell people what you know. That's exactly what Pierre doesn't want to be held against. He wants to be able to express, this person is corrupt, this person is doing this person is doing that. But if he had the clearance, he wouldn't be able to do it. But with all that being said, this was the end of day 4. We are moving into day 5. As I mentioned, things are heating up. And I'd love to hear from you guys. What do you think about all these situations that are popping up? What do you think about Carney and this whole Bermuda situation? Let me know in the comment section below. And as always, I will catch you guys on the next one. Thanks so much.